Tonight on Politicat, a Supreme Court ruling puts power in the hands of shooting victims' families.
A Facebook rebranding and a major change to Instagram. We look at how social media is evolving.
Plus, a victory for socialism in Spain, but still trouble ahead. We have the latest on Sunday's Spanish elections.
All that and more tonight on Politicat. It's your politics right now. Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Justin Sweetwood.
And I'm Joey Safchik. There's a lot to cover this week, so let's get right into it. Today, the Supreme Court ruled that families of the victims of the 2012 Sandy Hook massacre are allowed to sue the manufacturer of the weapon used in the shooting. The families argue that Remington Arms Company, maker of the AR-15, should be held liable for producing and promoting the rifle used by the shooter. Remington has tried to block the lawsuit, arguing it should not be allowed given the broad immunity given to arms manufacturers under the 2005 Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. After the block was denied by Connecticut and now the United States Supreme Courts, the suit will be allowed to proceed.
Bolivian President Evo Morales announced his resignation on Sunday. This was in response to massive demonstrations protesting a potentially fraudulent October election that won him his fourth term. Morales is the longest-serving Latin American leader and Bolivia's first indigenous president, but is yet to admit any wrongdoing. He only agreed to step down once the police and military turned against him. Concerns about the once popular leader began mounting in 2016 when he evaded the Bolivian two-term limit law and came to a head in the week since the October 20th election.
Protests in Hong Kong continued to escalate this week after police shot one protester and another was set on fire. The protester was the second protester shot by police since the protests began in June, though police have repeatedly drawn their weapons. The protester was shot after trying to intervene in an altercation between an officer and another protester. At this time, it's unclear who set the other protester on fire. Following these incidents, Hong Kong's leader has said he will, quote, spare no effort to halt the protests that have raged for 5 months.
Jeff Sessions is now hoping to reclaim his former Alabama Senate seat. Last Thursday, Sessions announced his intentions to run for election in 2020. Sessions formally served as Attorney General before resigning last year and showed his support for President Trump in a campaign ad saying, quote, the president's doing a great job for America and Alabama, and he has my strong support. In order to win the seat, Sessions will have to separate himself from a number of other Republicans, as well as Democrat and incumbent Doug Jones.
We now turn back to our coverage of Sessions' visit to campus and the ensuing student protests. Last week, our live coverage showed protesters surrounding Lutkin Hall, where Sessions delivered an address organized by Northwestern College Republicans. Now, the different groups of protesters and the Northwestern College Republicans are reflecting on the events. NNN's politics director Olivia Olander reported from the protests and has this follow-up.
More than 100 students came out to protest Attorney General Jeff Sessions' appearance on campus last week. A protest outside Lutkin Hall, where Sessions was speaking, coincided with another protest, a night of action which focused on Democratic voter mobilization. At times, the two groups overlapped, but students from both sides have said they were organized separately. Students interviewed that night said they showed up to oppose Sessions' presence on campus, given his values and policy history.
He's racist and sexist, and if they really want to be an inclusive campus, they can't have people who are against the very definition of inclusivity.
I support free speech, but I think that we shouldn't have people who are directly affecting the horrible things that our government is doing.
First-year Megan Gendelman said after the protest that she was specifically against Sessions being
anti-gay, anti-abortion, directly involved with, separating families at the border, ICE.
What incensed some students was during his time as AG, Sessions announced a zero-tolerance policy for people who cross the border illegally, leading to family separations. Among other anti-LGBTQ positions, he has voted against gay marriage and said the Civil Rights Act doesn't protect transgender people from workplace discrimination. As a senator, he co-sponsored over 40 anti-abortion bills. Vice President of Northwestern College Republicans, Dominic Bayer, said he had discussions with other students who were critical of Sessions' views.
I don't know why people criticize him, and I agree there's a case to be made against his views, and we can have a discussion about that. I mean, he's really not harming anyone by speaking at Northwestern. He's putting forth a set of views.
Bayer criticized the protesters who surrounded Lutkin.
They want to shunt out conservatives from the Northwestern community.
Not all protesters said they wanted to shut down Sessions' speech.
I didn't personally feel the need to try to stop him from speaking. I just, but I did want to be a part of the opposing force of it.
During the protest, there was conflict between students and police. At least one student was pushed by an officer as they tried to enter Lutkin through a back door. A window was also broken during the demonstration. According to a university spokesperson, no arrests were made and no injuries were reported. In an email, University President Morton Shapiro told NNN that administration is still looking into whether policy violations occurred, which could make some protesters vulnerable to discipline. He didn't specify what the discipline might be. Shapiro said students are protected, quote, to demonstrate but not to disrupt. University spokesperson John Yates responded to the protest in an email to NNN. He said students who tried to get past police were, quote, physically redirected and reiterated, quote, Northwestern is firmly committed to supporting all viewpoints, vigorous debate, and free expression on campus. We repeatedly reached out to multiple protesters who were active in front of Lutkin, but they declined to comment because they feared retribution. The voter mobilization Night of Action organizers, students David Gergis and Aishwarya Joyce, declined on-camera interviews. They did reiterate in a statement their, quote, commitment to peaceful protest and mobilization and condemn the property damage inflicted by others, as well as the police action against students. They also reaffirmed their commitment against Sessions and Trump's agendas, which they say are, quote, rooted in white supremacist, bigoted policies. Gendelman originally wanted to attend the Night of Action, but joined in the other protests when she saw it.
It's hard to have a person on your campus that has had such a close connection to change that he could have made for the better, but he made it for the worse. It's just hard to have that on your campus and not want to go and do something about it.
Olivia is joining us in studio to discuss her reaction and NNN's coverage. Thanks for being here, Olivia.
Thanks for having me.
So what are your takeaways from all of this 1 week after the protests?
Well, I think a huge thing is the fact that the Northwestern student body is conflicted on ideas of free speech and what that actually means. We're definitely going to have to reckon with that as a campus. Beyond that, though, these events highlighted the fact that there's a whole group of students who say they don't feel safe enough on campus when someone like Jeff Sessions comes to speak. I think a crucial part of this is having a better understanding of the struggles and fears that those students face. There's also ongoing issues here. Northwestern says they protect protesters, but they also say they're looking into whether these people violated Northwestern policy. If the university does decide that any of these students should be disciplined for protesting, that's a story too, and we'll cover it.
And who sponsored the Sessions speech? How did he get here?
Yeah, in addition to being sponsored by Northwestern College Republicans, Sessions' appearance was also promoted and supported by Young America's Foundation. They're a conservative organization that helps organize speaker events and then often covers the backlash to those events on their own website. Bayer, the vice president of College Republicans, told us that NUCR chose Sessions as the speaker before YAF got involved. He said NUCR paid the majority of the $9,000 that was paid to Sessions for the speech, but YAF also contributed. Most of NUCR's budget comes from a Northwestern Associated Student Government, Bayer said.
Now, Olivia, there's been some controversy over the way these events were covered by student journalists. Why did NNN and Politicat make the editorial decisions that we did?
Yeah, so it seems like every publication at Northwestern covered this in different ways. NNN made the choice not to take down our original coverage because we were covering the events as we saw them. Myself and two reporters who went with me saw how impactful and intense these protests were. It was an important story on campus that needed to be told. The Daily has been publicly criticized for their coverage and then in the last few days criticized again for apologizing for their coverage. I just want to express on a personal level that I have a lot of respect for the student journalists on this campus. There's always room for improvement, but I think paying careful attention to how we cover these topics is ultimately a good idea.
Thank you so much, Olivia. We all stand by what you said just now, and we'll be right back.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Over the past year, President Trump placed tariffs on Chinese goods, and China responded with tariffs of their own, putting the U.S. in a trade war with China. For more on how this is affecting Americans, we turn now to Justin with this week's Money Minute.
Thanks, Joey. Lots has been made in the past few months about the ongoing trade war between the United States and China. As a result, President Trump has increased tariffs across the board, with the burden falling on the backs of consumers right here in the States. New data in for September showed a record $7.1 billion paid by American businesses and consumers. This largely comes from a new 15% levy affecting things like technology, apparel, and other consumer goods coming from China. The value of these imports stood at $111 billion last year, according to the Wall Street Journal. Tariff revenue has increased 59% since September of 2018 and is up $600 million since August of this year, good for a 9% hike. To give you a tariff timeline, in March 2018, Trump imposed tariffs on over $350 billion worth of Chinese imports, and they're not stopping anytime soon. An additional $200 million in tariffs will come into play on December 15th. And a big part of this story comes from the fact that President Trump has repeatedly claimed that it's China paying for the tariffs and that this is a punishment for China. In reality, it's the U.S. importers that are being hurt, and some economists are saying that these tariffs could be the greatest threat to the economy. Let's go back to Joey.
Thanks, Justin. Social media is part of everything we do, and while it's made connecting with friends and family easier, it's also presented a host of problems. Facebook was attacked during and after the 2016 election for its failure to properly police Russian bots spreading information. It has repeatedly been criticized for the data it releases about users to companies, and it made the news recently for saying it will not take down ads, particularly political ads, that contain inaccurate or misleading information.
In response to that, Twitter announced that it will no longer allow any political ads on its platform. Stepping away from the political scene, another large part of social media is influencers, people who use their popularity to promote certain brands and lifestyles. Now, most of these exist on Instagram, which is why many are concerned about Instagram's decision to hide like counts, a change that will be implemented later this year. The change could hurt influencers, as their popularity will no longer be visible to other users. And to talk more about social media and how it's evolving, we'd like to welcome in our panel. We have Sylvia Goodman, features editor at North by Northwestern, and Virginia Langmaid, marketing director here at NNN.
So Facebook announced it's rebranding to make it clearer that some apps are part of the Facebook company, apps like Instagram and WhatsApp. Was this really something that people didn't know, and how will it change people's perceptions of those Facebook affiliated apps?
I definitely think it is something people didn't know. Given that I'm not sure how it works in Facebook's favor, I feel like a lot of the times when people are talking about Facebook, it's not in a good light in the public opinion. And so if Facebook is reinforcing this idea that they are also WhatsApp, that they are also Instagram, then the next time some big Facebook brouhaha comes up, Instagram's going to be associated with that. WhatsApp's going to be associated with that. I do think that in general people don't understand who owns most of these companies and how they're associated with each other, but I can't see this as being something that's going to raise Facebook's profile in any way.
Sylvia?
I disagree slightly in that I think it might not help Instagram's profile or WhatsApp's profile, but I do think it might help Facebook's image a little bit. Facebook, as you've said, has a lot of PR nightmare right now and a little bit of trouble. So I think reassociating themselves with platforms like Instagram that are mainly positive to a lot of people, I think that'll help Facebook a little bit.
It's a rather different demographic using Instagram as opposed to Facebook. Do you think this will bridge that gap and get more people using the other app, or do you think it'll make it more divisive?
I don't see a lot of change happening. I think that the gap between Instagram and Facebook is pretty solidified right now. And I think it's only going to continue to grow. I think Facebook users continue to get older and Instagram users are going to continue to just stay in their current age range. So yeah, I don't think this will have a huge impact.
Virginia, I'd like to turn to you now. How much will hiding like counts on Instagram hurt these influencers?
I think it really depends on the size of the influencer. I think that someone who has a really large following now, that's a very well-established influencer or voice on Instagram, probably isn't going to be hurt by this. Less by the fact that their brand is going to sustain, and more that I think they have a contingency plan. I think they have sponsor deals lined up. I think that people plan for this because they have massive marketing teams behind them. I think this may hurt or change smaller influencers or people trying to get that following. That's going to completely change the game, because right now, the outline for how you become someone on Instagram is very laid out, and it's been the same way for years, and it's based on like counts. And if you make those not public, then how does that change people's perception of you? How does that change whether people want to follow you in the first place?
Do you agree with Virginia here, or do you think it will hurt people across the board, at the top and the bottom?
I actually think a little bit of the opposite for those larger influencers. I worked in public relations over the summer, and a huge part of whether you choose to partner with an influencer is based on how much user engagement they get. So for a lot of these influencers, especially the really large ones, their influencer engagement rates are dropping dramatically. So I think being a little bit less open to see how the big difference between the number of followers they have and the number of likes they get will be really influential, will be a lot less apparent to people looking to partner with these influencers. So I think it might help influencers whose engagement rates are dropping a lot, which is the trend that's currently showing in the marketplace right now.
Now, we're talking predominantly right now about people whose livelihoods are based on their Instagram following. What about people who use Instagram supplementally, like journalists or actors or authors? How are they going to be impacted?
So I personally don't see a lot of journalists on Instagram. It's obviously mostly on Twitter, which hasn't mentioned anything about removing like counts. I think mostly it is going to affect influencers, but obviously it helps a lot to see your engagement. It'd be interesting to see how this changes how analytics are displayed about Instagram. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to look at, but I don't see it affecting journalism so much right now.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree, because I think that the purpose is different. I think that an influencer uses a platform like Instagram to grow their following, but I think someone like a journalist or an author, if you find their Instagram, you are already a member of their fan base. You are already someone they're trying to reach, and it's a way to, generate more user engagement and encourage that fandom going on. It's more difficult to randomly stumble across an author you'll love based on their Instagram page. So I think that these are people with more devoted and smaller followings who probably didn't have their followings impacted by like counts all that much in the first place. I can't see that impacting them.
Virginia, where does social media go from here? Can it regain people's trust and get back to its original intention of just connecting people?
Well, I don't know that it really needs to regain people's trust, honestly. I don't think that people across the board have that favorable of a view of social media, but we're not seeing people leave Facebook or Instagram or Twitter in droves. That's just not happening. I think we've gotten to a point where people sort of accept the privacy risks associated with being a part of these organizations. And I think that until consumers start leaving these platforms in droves, there's no reason for social media companies to adjust to that. If no one's asking for it, they won't change their business model.
Do you think a platform's intent can change over time?
Yes, I think Instagram, especially when business models come into play, right? So Instagram, before Facebook bought it, was a much different platform. It was much more about connecting people, like you said in your question. And I 100% agree with Virginia about, I don't think that these companies are going to change their policies. In fact, I think Instagram is becoming even more pay to play than it was previously. More and more influencers and companies have to pay in order to be seen by more people, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
All right, we'll have to leave it right there. We'll be back after the break.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Northwestern break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, spread for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
We know the news can be a little overwhelming, so we'd like to take a moment to catch you up on a few stories you might have missed. A senior aide to Democratic presidential candidate Tom Steyer allegedly offered contributions to local politicians in Iowa in exchange for endorsing Steyer's White House bid. This, according to multiple people with direct knowledge of the alleged conversations. The actions aren't illegal, although payments for endorsements do violate campaign finance laws if they're not disclosed. There's no evidence any Iowans accepted the offer.
There's an exclusively female ecological commune called Jinwar in the Kurdish territory in northern Syria. The village is home to some 30 women and their children and is ruled by a democratically elected council. It offers a safe haven for women whose lives were turned upside down by the Islamic State. Jinwar is in a state of uncertainty because the Turkish offensive in the region has forced the feminist village to evacuate in the wake of heavy shelling.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's attempt to end the deadlock in Parliament was unsuccessful on Sunday. Sanchez called for the November 10th elections after failing to form a coalition government following the country's April elections. While Sanchez's Socialist Party came in first in Sunday's election, it fell short of an absolute majority. The most significant win in the election went to the far-right party Vox, which won 52 seats, up from the 24 seats it won in April.
Does a life sentence end when you die? A prisoner in Iowa argues he served his life sentence for murder and that it ended when he died briefly in 2015. A three-judge panel rejected his argument. His plea was not unprecedented. A similar case in 1988 was also rejected. If prisoners are considered alive for purposes like organ donation, experts argue the same would go for serving a life sentence.
And to end our panel on a fun note, we'll be playing our game, Headlines. Virginia knows how to play, but here's how it works for you, Sylvia. We're going to read you 3 headlines. 2 of them are false. 1 of them is true. You guess the true one. They're a little out there, outlandish. Ready? Okay. First, a small village in Ohio may be deciding its mayoral race by flipping a coin if 2 candidates are still tied after election results are certified. Number 2, an Arizona man is suing the state legislature over the state's failure to observe daylight savings time, saying it makes it, quote, too complicated to talk with friends and family in other states. And third, farmers throughout the Midwest are saying they won't grow their corn mazes next year because the early season snow is lowering attendance rates and profits.
All right. I think
Virginia, you look very dedicated.
I know.
You're
Virginia
really
really
ready
thinking
for
this
this to
through.
win
really
headlines.
am. I'm giving
Are
this
we
a lot.
surprised?
Go for it.
I'm deciding between 2 and 1, and I think it's 1.
It's 1. Yeah. Sylvia?
Okay, I think I'm also going to go with 1. I don't think it's 2, though. I think that one's a little too out there.
It is 1. I think 2's out there too. That's wild. It is 1. A lot of Ohio stories and headlines.
God,
Just like
I
to
wonder
point
who
that
wrote
out.
these.
All right, we've got another round of headlines. First, a shelter cat named Quilty was put in solitary confinement for letting the other cats out. You hate to see that. Second, Elon Musk expressed interest in owning an NBA team. And third, local police caught a Florida man illegally feeding flamingos at a local zoo. Virginia, you started off.
Okay, so I definitely know which one this is. Would you like to go first?
No, that's a great response. You don't want to give it away. Yeah,
Right?
okay, there we go.
No,
Virginia's in
okay.
it to win it.
I mean, Florida Man is always a classic. I don't know. I feel like Elon Musk, that's the next logical step for him, right? I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think I'm going to have to go with 3, though.
It's not 3. It is 1. Sometimes we like to trick
It's
people by
1?
saying Elon Musk. He's a regular staple in headlines, but
We
it
do.
is 1.
Whenever we have Elon Musk, it's not true.
Okay, good
So
to know.
now you know
I'll
for
keep
next
it.
time.
What is true? The shelter cat named Quilty let the other cats out.
I should have known it was 2. It was too specific.
How is that possible? How does it work?
Well, I mean, depending on...
As our in-house cat expert.
Right? The shelter expert here. There are a lot of different cages you keep animals in, and some of them are very easy to get into. We actually, at the Evanston Animal Shelter, will resort to zip tying cages closed because some of the cats are particularly advantageous.
But solitary confinement? Like, that sounds like a punishment. Like, it knows that it did something wrong.
My cat would love that. My
Right.
cat hates other living beings.
It also probably wouldn't know that it's a punishment.
I don't know. Are you a cat person?
I'm a dog person. I'm sorry. Clearly, that's the unpopular opinion on the
It is here at Politicat. What would you expect? All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for playing. We'll be right back.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go you Northwest, go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all the go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, spread for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
Earlier this week, a conservative project leaked a videotape that appears to show ABC anchor Amy Robach saying that the network, quote, quashed an interview with Jeffrey Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre. Project Veritas has a checkered history. The organization generally functions by releasing undercover videos taken by volunteers posing as other people. It has a prominent conservative lean, and its targets include members of the mainstream media. However, this story has gained traction in other outlets. ABC has denied that it pulled the story, and Robach released a statement saying in part that she was only expressing frustration that the interview couldn't air because the network, quote, could not obtain sufficient corroborating evidence to meet ABC's editorial standards.
This is not the first time a news organization has been accused of mishandling information about Jeffrey Epstein, who has been accused of sexual assault and trafficking. According to NPR reporting, a former Vanity Fair editor editor-in-chief, has been accused of neglecting to report on allegations against Epstein as early as 2003. The New York Times removed reporter Landon Thomas Jr. from covering Epstein when it was revealed he asked Epstein to contribute to his charity project. Of course, any allegation against someone should be fully reported in a fair and ethical way. But that can be tricky with someone like Epstein, who surrounded himself with rich and powerful people. As the media groups continue to consolidate, the number of people making those ethical decisions will continue to dwindle. Today, 6 companies control about 90% of U.S. media. As mergers continue, journalists will have to consider the power players behind their story and where to go from here.
That's all the time we have for tonight. For all of us here at Politicat, I'm Joey Safchik.
And I'm Justin Sweetwood. Thanks for watching. Good night.